Welcome to the Imposter to Icon podcast, where we help you break free from your inner imposter so you can go out and live an iconic life. I am your host, your wingman, Thomas Edwards. And what more relevant place to speak about your imposter than in relationships and dating? And I find that those who tend to be even more of an imposter tend to take a casual approach to dating, hoping that it would create some success for them in their lives. And I've found over 15 plus years of working with people, that's not the case. Now, let me ask you a question. What if everything you thought about or knew about casual dating was wrong? Like, what if it actually wasn't the way that you see it playing out today, and in fact, makes it even worse for yourself? So in this episode, I'm going to pull back the curtain. I'm going to pull back the curtain and talk about the real impact of swipe culture. We're going to talk about the impact of friends with benefits and no strings attached relationships and all the evolutions or de-evolutions that have occurred since. And whether you're actively swiping right or have you sworn off apps or dating altogether, the hidden truths I uncover on this episode may radically change your dating and your love life forever. And I'm going to cover three basic points, and they are the evolution of casual dating in modern society. We're going to talk about the psychological impact of casual dating and how it actually feeds your inner imposture and self-sabotages your goals for those of you who desire to be in a long-term committed relationship. And the third is, how do you navigate casual dating, if that's still something that you want to do, with authenticity and purpose? Of course, this caveat is if you are looking to eventually be in a long-term committed relationship. And so let's take a moment and sit back and enjoy, hopefully, what could be a thought-provoking episode on the Impostor to Icon podcast. So first, we're going to talk about the evolution of casual dating in modern society. For us to really talk about it, we need to define casual dating in today's context. And casual dating, I'm going to be 40 years old next year. Casual dating is very different today than it was when I was in my 20s, and even when I was in my teens, hearing about them in magazines or watching on TV. And it's evolved from the traditional no strings attached nature of relationships to more nuanced forms of what's known as non-committed relationships. And this is very important. This way that we like to categorize and label things these days creates all these nuances and thus creates so much more confusion for the average dater out there trying to figure out how do they navigate the waters to get what they're looking for, which when most clients come to me, they're looking for a long-term committed relationship. But that non-committed relationship, that label is very, very important. And we're going to get into why that's important in a little bit. And let's face it, the dating apps have positively and negatively impacted what we see as casual relationships. I mean, on one hand, the positive impact is access. It's created more access to possible matches than ever before. And we've seen it with the amount of people that have been getting married on the apps. But nowadays, we've become desensitized to all the possibilities, and it's created a shopping mentality that we've seen. I mean, just like you can go on to Google or ChatGPT now and you can search for whatever you want and get the exact answer. People are actually looking to do this online. And they have search parameters, and that's how they can kind of figure out, well, I want this particular mold, and they need to be this big and this fit and making this amount of money, and they need to like this and not that, and they want to have kids or not want kids. And some of those things are important, but once we get into it, there's a lot of things that are not important that we believe are important, and we filter ourselves out from actually being able to find anything serious. And so this alone can affect casual dating dynamics because you're not sure what you're going to get. Plus, with catfishing and the way just online dating is now today, with so many scammers and people having horror stories, everyone has their defenses up. right? You're not in a place where you're open or receptive to the possibilities of what traditional dating can bring. And so it completely levels the casual dating landscape. And I think also there's generational differences, right? Like I was not born into a tech age. I had to grow in a developing tech age. I didn't get my access to a phone or a beeper or pager for those of you who are that old until I was maybe in middle school, going into high school. But my daughter, who's 7 years old, I mean, she has now grown. She's now born into a world where everyone has a phone and they're using technology, and so the attitude and the perspective and the differences between, let's say, I'm a older millennial and Gen Z are almost night and day. The way they communicate, the platforms in which they communicate, how they perceive dating and the pursuit of love, very different. And we've seen this across various generations. Even the generation before me, they didn't have technology nearly as much as we did. And the way they went about dating and casual dating was very different than the way that I went about it. And so we have to kind of point out that the evolution will continue as new generations come in, as technology advances, but it's going to create more nuance and potentially confusion until the cycle shifts back around towards a layer of simplicity around relationships and the various dynamics. Now, what are the perceived benefits of casual dating? Well, casual dating can provide opportunities for exploration and personal growth without the pressure of long-term commitment. A lot of you guys who just are commitment phobes, or even women out there who are, avoidant of commitment, you might love this, because I think it is important for us to engage in relational contact. You should build relationships. And if you can do it in as low pressure of an environment or a dynamic, you have opportunity to grow. And you get to explore what it is that you like and you don't like, things that you need, things that you don't need. And I think that's important when you're in that type of that dating mindset. Now, I also believe that casual dating can help individuals better understand their preferences and their deal breakers, right? I just talked about that. So you might decide, maybe I don't want kids. And then you meet someone, you're like, oh my gosh, like he'd be a great dad. Maybe I want kids. And maybe you date someone else and you're like, man, I would not want them to have kids. Maybe I don't want kids. You figure this out when you start to connect with more people and you start to date more people. Now, I'm not saying having sex with all these people. I'm just saying when you go on these dates and you have these interactions, you start to get clear around the type of values that are important to you when you're pursuing a long-term committed partner. Now, some of you might be into sexual exploration. That's up to you. It's not something that I personally recommend. But I think for guys, that's also going to be something that's important too, because with more experience romantically and more experience sexually, the more confident and understanding guys can be around the opposite sex. And so I can see where there's importance in being able to drive there. For women, I believe it's different. I don't think the sexual exploration is going to be to an advantage in today's marketplace where it once was before, but that's just my perspective. You can comment below and let me know what you think. And the third thing is, casual dating can fit into the lives of career-focused individuals. And it creates the opportunity for romantic experiences to flourish without sacrificing professional goals. Now, this is something that we hear about all the time in today's world, where you have career-driven women, career-driven men, both going into the marketplace, demanding careers, building their lives. They don't have time for a committed long-term relationship. And so what better solution than a casual relationship? No strings attached, all is well, right? But there's some common misconceptions about casual dating that I want to identify and let you guys know that it may not be all that's cracked up to be. So there's also this, there's this stereotype that talks about, casual daters are afraid of commitment or they're emotionally unavailable. That sometimes may be true, but I don't think that's true across the board. A lot of clients that I work with who are coming out of a relationship, maybe a divorce, maybe they're widowed, they're not looking to hop into a relationship right off the bat, but they're open to one eventually. But the only way for them to get there is to go out and casually interact and develop some romantic connections with other people. So they are emotionally available, but they're not going to be, jumping right into the next relationship, which I've heard from a lot of other people. They don't want that. They don't want to be the next rebound or the next relationship after a breakup. And I get that. But it's important to understand that, not all casual daters are commitment phobes or they don't prioritize relationships or they're unemotionally available. That might just be your selection of who you're choosing to casually date. That is not true across the board. And some people may choose casual relationships for the reasons that I mentioned before. Maybe they are very busy. I have one client who travels a ton and he is not around 90% of the time. And so it doesn't mean that he doesn't want a long-term relationship, but the person who he's with has to be okay with him not being around 90% of the time. And so then it comes up, well, can casual dates and casual relationships come up in that situation? Well, I've seen that play out plenty of times and it worked out great. Some of those relationships turn into long-term committed relationships. And so sometimes we can use casual dating as kind of let's try out this dynamic. Let's try out this lifestyle to see if it's something that I want in my life because I wasn't open to it before. More on that later. And, there's also this misconception that casual relationships are always short-term, meaning, that they don't last a long time. They're purposely designed to be that way. So there's no long-term commitment, but that's not necessarily true. I've had clients and even friends who've had no strings attached relationships go on for multiple years and both parties being okay with it for the most part. And the only reason why it ends is because their wants and their desires have then changed and they're no longer in alignment with each other. So they amicably part ways and move on. So this idea that because it's casual that it needs to be short is actually not true. And then lastly, casual dating can sometimes lead to a deeper emotional connection. I just rattled off a few examples just off the bat, but casual dating is not just purely superficial. I think sometimes people really just automatically think that. That's not entirely true. And some casual dating relationships can lead to romantic encounters. I think the problem that I see or the challenge that I see is that a lot of people just aren't open to that possibility, right? They need to know right from the start that this person is very serious or else they don't want to do it. And I can understand where that comes from. They might have been slighted or jaded in the past, and so they have to be more protective, and that makes sense. But also understand that you might be limiting the possibilities of finding the love that you want by setting all these filters. This is no different than you setting parameters in your dating profile or when you're on search sites looking for someone. The more filters you put up, the less quantity that you're going to have. And just because you have less quantity doesn't mean that it increases the quality. In fact, the quality might actually be spoiled because of how hard of a filter you use. This is applicable to life. So if you're not open to opportunities, then you're going to reduce the odds and the chances of you finding the love that you're looking for. So what's the psychological impact of casual dating? Let's talk about that for a little bit. So when you're in casual dating, there's this idea of what I call micro rejections. Now, I don't like to use the term rejections, but we as men don't like being, we don't like to hear no. Not because we don't honor it, but a no does impact us, whether it's a soft no or a hard no. And when we're casually dating and we're not in something that's more serious, or we don't know that's going to be something that's serious and it's something that we want, that micro rejection can add up over time. And then eventually it has an impact on our overall self-esteem, our self-worth, and our ability to figure out how to actually find what it is that we're looking for. And so for guys, I think it's important to understand that you need to be aware of these micro rejections and find ways to bounce back from them. Don't just accept them and then allow them to materialize. I think it's important for guys to understand that when you're in casual dating situations, it's up to you to communicate what boundaries that you're willing to set, where you are wanting the relationship to go, and making sure that you're consistent in your communication so that way there is no miscommunication. And when there's no miscommunication, that means there's lesser chance of these micro rejections to take place. Also, some of the psychological effects of casual dating could be casual dating burnout. We've seen it already. We already see it with swiping. People are burnt out with swiping. People are burned out online, trying different ways of meeting people. Casual dating and having a softer approach can give you a burnout too, just like anything else. And so I'm a big proponent of not relying on one type of dating or one platform to be the end all and be all for your dating activity. You have to diversify. Multiple apps, multiple platforms, both online and offline, different types of dating. Allow yourself to be open to different possibilities. So when you focus on one thing and you go hard in the paint with that, particularly in dating, you can burn yourself out. And so that is another effect of that. And a telltale sign of that is if you are going into every dating scenario, whether it's a swipe, a date, or a social interaction, and you are skeptical, you are tired, and you are negative, that's the sign. Those are the 3 signs that you are burning out from casual dating or dating period. And you need to take a step back, reassess, recharge, and then get back into the game. And the last impact that could, the psychological impact of casual dating could be, excuse me, you could start to develop some bad habits for future relationships. And so what could work in a casual dating dynamic may not work in a long-term dating dynamic. But if that's what you've become accustomed to, it may be hard to make the switch or the transition to a long-term dating situation. And so keep those things in mind in terms of the impact. Now, I think there's some kind of situations at play in terms of, in casual dating. I for some of you guys might be aware of like attachment styles. I think that plays a role in casual dating. And so, the 3 attachment styles are secure, and there's anxious, and there's avoidant. And they can manifest in casual dating scenarios. And when you are not in what could be considered a secure relationship, and that's technically in a casual environment, anyone can come and go at any time, right? There's no sense of certainty, there's no stability or security unless it's well communicated. But even then, there's still this undercurrent. It might exacerbate some insecure attachment styles, or it could provide opportunities for developing more secure attachment, because if you're someone who needs that security, or else you can't function in a relationship, then maybe casual dating isn't for you. Or it can be an opportunity for you to practice a little bit more self-security inside of that dynamic to create more self-esteem, more confidence in various dating scenarios. And so you get to choose how you want to approach it. Do you want to allow your insecure attachment style to impact your relationships, whether they're casual or more committed? Or can you use it as a learning opportunity to develop more of a secure attachment in any type of relationship that you're in? I like to go the latter, and I always try to, I don't want to say influence, but I always like to highlight the latter for a lot of my clients, because that's where a lot of learning and growth opportunity takes place, is how do you develop the skill set? How do you develop the characteristics of a secure attachment style if that's not something that you're used to or accustomed to? Here's an opportunity where you can do that. And here's some of the hidden stressors of casual dating. When you are casually dating, let's say you're trying to date multiple people, the mental load. I remember being back in college, and one of my best friends at the time, he has just become single. He hadn't been single in a very long time, and he was just going to go out and have a good time, and he was going to date multiple women. And we would get together in the dorm room, and he pulled out this spreadsheet. And I was like, what is this? And he said, well, this is the way for me to remember the dates and who I was with and what they were wearing and where I took them. And he had it all laid out. And for one, I was impressed because I never thought of anything like this. But two, it made me realize how much of of a cognitive load it might be for you to be in having these multiple kind of micro relationships with people. And it can be just a really stressful situation to put yourself into unnecessarily. And so think about the scheduling, the emotional boundaries, the social dynamics, remembering locations, remembering talking points and values and interests and hobbies and all these things. It can be really overwhelming. And I totally understand, because some of my clients, like, I can only really date one person at a time. I get that. I have some clients who they can do the spreadsheet and they can date multiple people at a time. I get that too. So be okay with what you can handle, because the more you take on, the more of a load that can happen that you can create for yourself unnecessarily. Also, in today's world, I mean, like I said, there's so much choice. So you can be completely overwhelmed with choice, and it then turns into decision fatigue and anxiety. I mean, you can only swipe right so many times. Eventually, you get to the point where you're just swiping. And let's face it, a lot of you guys are probably swiping on people that you otherwise wouldn't swipe. But I know a lot of guys who do that because they just want to get a match and they're not getting it. And so they're willing to, just in a fraction of a second, lower their standards just so they can get a match. But then that just creates fatigue. It creates decision overwhelm. And it also creates anxiety, because if you're just swiping and you're not getting a match, what are you saying to yourself in that experience? And so that is a hidden stressor that I know a lot of guys deal with. And then when you're caught up in casual dating, how does that impact your long-term goals? You know, are you delaying the committed relationship? Are you changing your perspective on monogamy? Is now that something that is off the table for you? Is it still on the table for you? Are you living those values? Once again, the overwhelm and the misalignment between what you believe and how you're living can create a stressor. This is where, like, the imposter can come in, because you might feel like, oh, I need to date around and I need to dive into the pool, when reality is you want to be cuddled up with your boo. And if you're living this way, but your heart is really designed to be this way, the tension is the imposter. And at some point, it's going to snap. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of a relationship in the middle of that happening. And so it's so important for you to stay true to who you are. If that's what you're looking for, then do that. Even if it means it's going to take a little bit longer for you to find that person, better that than trying to jump into something that's just not authentic for you. Now, excuse me. Now, before we get into, how do we navigate, the casual dating environment with authenticity and purpose, I just want to reset the table here and say, there's some hidden truths here around casual dating. Some of you guys might be listening to this and may not agree with this. Comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Some of you might be thinking, this is spot on, or hey, I never thought about this. Comment below. I want to hear what you have to think about this. Dating is always a polarizing topic, and I love to hear what people have to say about it. I've seen this play out for 15 years, and so I like to believe I know what I'm talking about, even in today's dating landscape, because I've seen it and I continue to see it in real time. So what I'm sharing here is not just based on my personal experience, but this is through the experience of thousands of clients I've worked with over 15 years. So how do we now navigate casual dating with authenticity and purpose? Well, I hinted at it in the last segment, which is it's about aligning your dating with your personal values, right? And so what is your philosophy? Well, before we get into the philosophy, what is your vision? Do you want a long-term relationship? Are you into monogamy? Are you not into monogamy? Are you just looking for a rebound? Are you looking to build confidence in yourself and your dating prospects? Like, what is the current vision that you have for your dating life? What's the philosophy then that's in the values that are built there that's going to help you carry out that vision? Those two questions, if you can answer them, then make it very easy for you to then know what you need to do. And so your values and your actions need to be in alignment with that. If they're not, then you're just going to feel like an imposter trying to do something that you're not built to do. It doesn't mean that you're not capable of becoming that person, but it needs to be within the value system that you live by. Now, when I work with a lot of clients who come in and they want to attract a certain type of woman, I make a hard judgment of whether or not they have it in them to become that person. Because yes, I can help someone become who they want to. I think anyone has the capacity to be someone they're not. That's hence the imposter. We all have the ability to become someone that we're not. The problem with that is you can't hold that lie forever, right? The stress and the weight of carrying that lie inside of a relationship is too hard to bear. It will fall down like a house of cards. It just will. So, but that doesn't mean that there's certain characteristics of the person that you want to be is not within you. And that's the part that I love to work on, is that getting those characteristics to come out so that you can attract the type of person that you want in your life. And so you have to be clear on what your values are, what your vision is, and the philosophy in which you want to live these values by. That's what's really important. And when you are clear in your values, then you can communicate those values in your boundaries in terms of how you want to date, who you want to date, when you want to date, how many you want to date. You can then start to become more clear and specific in all the parameters in which you want to navigate your dating life, whether it's casual or leaning more towards a committed relationship. This creates personal integrity. And when you have personal integrity and you have clarity like this, it naturally elevates your confidence. You no longer feel like an imposter. You know who you are, you know what you want, and you know what you stand for. And then all that's left is for you to go out and live that out loud. And here's something that needs to really take precedent for those who are actively dating. You need to take personal inventory. Practicing regular self-reflection is so key to improving any part of your life. It is probably one of the most underrated skill sets, I think, in life. And this is a way for you to understand, where was I true to myself? Where wasn't I true to myself? How can I engage in a way that is more in alignment with who I am, even if I am in a casual dating experience? And I might be looking towards something more specific, more long-term and committed. Now, once you're with the self-reflection, now we're getting into communicating openly and authentically, right? And so I had mentioned this before, the importance of communicating these boundaries, communicating these expectations. I mean, I remember back when I was in my early 20s, way before I met my wife, I would go out and I would have a good time and I would make connections with women. And, before we would do anything, I would just let them know, hey, I'm really enjoying this. I'm enjoying you. And I want to make it clear, I'm not looking for anything committed or long-term right now. That doesn't mean that I can't change, but that's just where I'm at right now. I need you to be okay with that before I move forward anymore, because I want to be fair to you and be upfront. When you're able to communicate with that, I'm not saying it releases liability on your part, but you're creating these clear expectations and you're communicating it. And here's what I feel like a lot of people can go awry here is they don't communicate that consistently. They think they say it once and then that's enough. That is not true because there's so many layers that take place over the time that if you don't remind them of these expectations, if they haven't changed, then it's so easy to get wrapped up in the emotions of what's unfolding and to have deeper meaning in what's going on between you two. So while you may have said it once and you're staying up here above the surface, well, there's so much time that has gone by and so many memories and so many examples and behaviors that are showing that that's not connected to this. And now the person that you're with has deeper meaning. And while you've been up in the surface thinking that you've been clear, they might be thinking that you have not been clear. But the truth is you just haven't been consistent. And so it's so important for you to be consistent in making sure it's clear until things change. Then you change the communication. But it's so important out of the respect, because if they're looking for something serious, if things change and they're looking for something more serious now because they may have seen that in you, they may even want that in you, but you're not available to give that to them, then they can have the opportunity to move towards what they ultimately want. That is so important. The second thing is the way I just kind of rattled off whatever statement I just used about kind of setting the expectations. For some of you, that might be a very difficult thing to say. And so you have to practice it. Say it out loud to yourself. Say it in front of a mirror. Record your voice, as creepy as that might be. But you have to hear yourself have these conversations. So that way, when it happens, you can actually say it as confidently and as clearly as possible. They may not be down for that, and that's okay. You have to be prepared for them to say no. And by the way, that's not a rejection. If you want something casual and they don't want something casual, that's not them rejecting you. That is them rejecting your offer, which is very, very different. If you were offering a long-term committed relationship and that's what they wanted, they would have easily had said yes, but you had a different offer and that's what they rejected. So we have to be clear on making sure that we don't connect the fact that because there's a misalignment in our values and what we're looking for, that all of a sudden we need to take this personally and they're rejecting us. That's not true, not in these type of scenarios. So it's important to develop skill sets. And I think it's not even skill sets, it's courage and resilience in having these difficult conversations, just expressing when feelings start to develop that you didn't expect to come up, or if you need to end a casual relationship. You need to be willing to have these conversations. This is what adulting is really like. When you're having adult conversation, you should be able to have these type of what's called crucial conversations or critical conversations that's going to create a conflict. And two adults should be able to figure out how to resolve this in as clean of a way as possible, even if there's emotions and romance involved. Let that be a skill set that you can learn. I can promise you, if you can learn this, this is going to enhance every relationship you have in your life. And then the important thing is to maintain honesty and transparency without oversharing and creating unnecessary emotional entanglement, right? So it's not about the honesty and transparency. I've already talked about that. You need to be open, you need to be honest, you need to have personal integrity, but it's the maintenance of it. You have to be consistent in sharing this. I'm going to keep saying it until we get it, because we just think we say it once and then we're good. That's not true. You got to be consistent. You have to be repetitive. Even if it seems like you're just beating a dead horse, you probably are, but it needs to be said enough to make sure it's clear. And then I like the idea of using casual dating as a tool for personal growth. There's a lot of guys out there who I've worked with, and you might be listening right now, who honestly you just don't have enough experience to know how to navigate dating, how to navigate creating connections with women. And that's okay. It's not your fault, but now it's your responsibility to do something about it. And so while you might be looking to get into a long-term committed relationship, the process might have to include casually dating some women along the way for you to get some clarity around what it's going to take to not only get into, but maintain a long-term committed relationship. And so inside, you can use these casual dating dynamics to practice communication skills. It'll help you build confidence. You can even practice emotional vulnerability, excuse me, which, by the way, when I say that, it's almost like a trigger word. I don't want to be emotional around women. They'll betray me. Let's put that aside for a second. When I'm talking about emotional vulnerability, I'm just saying you can share parts of yourself that doesn't show weakness. It actually shows openness and strength and willingness. And I'll tell you something, if a woman knocks you down or exploits that, you just leave them right away. You just leave them right away. Like I have zero tolerance for that. And I tell my clients right away to just cut the cord, because there's zero tolerance for that. We go through enough already, and we are reluctant as it is to share ourselves emotionally. So to have someone that we want to hold space for us and to do that, they don't deserve a place in our lives, period, end of story. But In these type of conversations, you get to practice sharing more of yourself in a way that you normally wouldn't share with your bros, for example, something that can create more intimacy and connection and affection between you and a romantic partner. Now, I'm a big fan of self-reflection and self-assessment. And so when you are on dates or when you're in a relationship, you should be regularly self-reflecting how you are showing up inside that relationship. How are you showing up in the dates? What are you feeling really confident about? What are you not feeling so confident about? What is he or she responding well to or not responding well to? To be really critical, not of yourself, but critical of seeing the details and the nuances of how you're showing up, looking at the details and seeing how you can be better each and every day. I remember when I was, excuse me, once again in my 20s, when I went on dates, when I had interactions with people, I would go back and I would reflect on it. I would, I would write down all the details. How did I start the conversation? What was I wearing? Did I have my hands in my pockets? Was I smiling? Did I make eye contact? What was the conversation about? Did they laugh? Did I get closer to them? Was I flirting with them? Did I end up with their number? Did I get a date with them? How did I feel walking away? What did I think they felt when they were walking away? These are all things that I took note of. And then I would ask myself, like, what will I do to continue to develop certain skill sets? And then what can I do to be better going into the next interaction or the next date? I would do this religiously, repetitively, and it just accelerated my ability to show up better on dates or on interactions with women. And I have my clients do this too. When they are working with me one-on-one, I have them give me their own self-reflection on interactions that they have with women or dates, because it's important to see how you see yourself inside of these dating dynamics. And if you can find opportunities for growth, you will get better. So it's so important. And lastly, but not least important, I think it's the most important, is that casual dating can help you then prioritize the criteria that is most meaningful to you. And it actually improves your ability to recognize compatibility. So if you've only dated 3 people in your life, it's going to be much harder for you to find, statistically, it's going to be much harder for you to find who you're actually looking for in a fully compatible mate than someone who's dated more than that. That's just statistics. Doesn't mean it happens every time, but statistically, it's in your favor. The more you date, the more people you interact with, the clearer you get around what your criteria is, around who you're looking for a long-term partner. And so it's really important just to understand, as we recap, that casual dating is not a bad thing. It looks different today in this generation than it has in generations in the past. I think the more we simplify it, the less confused we are. And it is done through understanding our values, being able to communicate that in a way that's open, honest, transparent, but most importantly, consistent. And then consistently self-reflecting on your interactions and your dates so you can find ways to be better and get clear on what you ultimately want in the long term. So I hope that this was really valuable. If you have had struggles in casual dating, I want to hear about it below. Share your stories in the comments below. If you felt that casual dating helped you find your partner, I want to hear that too. And anything else in between. If you felt like you've struggled, or if you had success, I want to hear about it. If you disagreed with anything I said here, comment below. I want to hear about that too. Now, if you like this episode, I would appreciate it if you gave it a like. If you found this useful, share with someone else that may want to hear about it if they're casually dating and they feel burnt out. And please subscribe. I put out episodes every single Friday, either myself or myself with a guest, as we talk about various topics that can include your imposter and how do you overcome it so you can live that iconic life. And listen, if you're interested in working to improving your quality of life, whether it's about what we just talked about, whether it's dating, personal fitness, authenticity, living with more purpose, so on and so forth, you can go to theprofessionalwingman.com/apply, and I'll reach out to you personally and have a conversation with you. And by the way, if you enjoyed this podcast, take a listen to my very first podcast. I think it's either here or here, somewhere here, where I actually talked about the state of dating in 2024 and how to best navigate it. You guys take care.